James was walking home from school when he heard something sloshing around in the water. He slowly walked over to check and saw a dog paddling for dear life. James hastens his pace and runs towards the dog and pulls him out of the river. Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. When James puts the dog back on the ground, he looked at the dog and noticed the animal had strange stains around its belly. He wanted to check it up close, but was a little apprehensive to creep closer to the dog. Instead, James decides to take the dog home and clean the dog to remove the stains. When his parents see the dog, they decided to bring him to the vet instead. The vet immediately sees that this dog isn't like any others. Something is terribly wrong with this dog, and the vet couldn't figure out what. He has never seen anything like this before. He decides to do some examinations on the dog. What could it possibly be? After long examinations, the results finally came back. The vet already knew it wouldn't be good, given how the dog looked. He logs into the computer, looks at the results, and turns pale. It was something he had never seen before, and he immediately called the police. James was so confused. Why did the vet call the police? Could something happen to him? So many questions went through James's head. The vet asked several questions to James and his parents. The questions were quite weird. It was more about where he found the dog rather than the results of the test. The vet ended the questioning by saying that he needed to call the police if James didn't cooperate. James is telling the truth, however. The vet called the police, and once the police arrived, James needed to come to the police station for further questioning. James got terrified by the idea of being arrested. He did not understand what was happening to him. James' parents are crying and begging the police officers to not take him to the police station. What did he do wrong here? He is just a 10-year-old boy who found a dog and tried to help him. He shouldn't be arrested for doing a kind favor to the dog. Unfortunately, the begging and crying of James' parents didn't help, and James got arrested and was put in the police car. He looked his parents scared in the eyes when they were driving off. James' parents stood there helpless, watching their son being arrested. James had never been in a police car and was impressed by what it looked like, but he was especially scared of the feeling of being arrested. He started to ask all sorts of questions to the police officers about why he was being arrested, but he did not get any answers. Once at the police station, they treated James like a criminal. They were rude and pushed him into the interrogation room. No questions were asked, and people were angry looking at James. He then was sitting alone in a dark, creepy room. Then an officer came into the interrogation room and started asking James questions. Then one of the officers noticed that James was very scared. The police decided to be open about the situation towards James because they no longer saw him as a suspect. When James heard the reason why the dog was in this critical state, he was shocked. Last few months, the police found a lot of dogs in the same condition as James' dog. These dogs seem to have been fed certain substances that should make them better fighting dogs. However, these substances make the dogs sick, and most of the time, they end up dead. To find out who was drugging these dogs, the police opened a case. This serious crime needed to be solved, but it turned out to be very challenging. After months of searching, they finally found their first clue. For months, the police were looking for the criminal organization that was responsible for the death and torture of these poor dogs. The police had a suspect in sight, Craig Johnson. Recent operations had led the police towards Craig Johnson, but this time they could have the evidence to take action. The leader of the criminal organization was called Craig Johnson, aka Crazy Johnson. He was a well-known figure in the underworld. He was detained several times for various felonies. They feared him greatly in the streets of the city. The police strongly suspect that Craig Johnson and his gang are responsible for the dead dogs. Until now, the police had no evidence to know the whereabouts of the dog fighting, and also no evidence to arrest the criminal organization of Craig Johnson. But James' dog might lead to a breakthrough, as it is the first dog that was found alive. The extreme story of this Crazy Johnson shocked James. How could you treat these adorable dogs like this? James eventually came up with a plan, which surprised the officers because it wasn't actually that bad. They even decided to follow up on it. The police decided to provide the dog with a GPS tracker. The idea was to leave the dog in the hood of the criminal organization to lure out Crazy Johnson. He should take the dog back to the fight. The police would then be able to track the GPS tracker of the dog to the fighting event and catch them in the act. The plan was put into action, and the dog was given a GPS tracker before being dropped off near Crazy Johnson Hood, where it was active. They hoped the dog would be noticed and be taken by one of Cray's entourage. The police waited a few hours, but nothing happened. But then, finally, they saw Cray heading outside. Immediately, Cray spotted the dog, and you could see the confusion on his face. Cray picked up the dog and took it inside. Now it was a waiting game. Would Cray take the dog with him to the fighting event? It took a while before the police saw some significant movement in the GPS tracker. It went to several locations, most of which appeared familiar to the police. But one location was in the middle of nowhere, which was quite suspicious. The police thought you would move on, but the GPS signal remained at the same place. 15 minutes later, the police decided to take action, as they suggested it might actually be the fight's location. The police were shocked when they came closer to the GPS location. The police arrived at the scene and discovered that there was no area where dog fights were taking place. However, they noticed Cray talking to someone else in a car with the dog. A deal appeared to be in progress. The police decided to take action. The police saw Cray was involved in a drug deal and decided to arrest him. Even though it was enough to put Cray away, there was more to it. The police were still keen to take down the whole criminal organization of Cray to prevent further deaths of the poor dogs in the city. Cray Johnson was put into an interrogation room so the police could start asking questions about the dogfighting event. Cray told the police he would only cooperate if he got a reduced sentence. The police have thought about this for a long time. They decide to agree to Cray's request to end the dogfighting. Cray told the police everything they should know to put an end to this nightmare. The team was being prepared by police for the raid on the dogfighting grounds as they lined up. The police had waited months for this, and everyone could not wait to handcuff these psycho criminals. The police cars are prepared and ready for the operation. In the end, they drove to 5 different locations, all at once. You can imagine that this is a largely scale operation, which involved a lot of police officers. They took down 2 criminal organizations, and 56 people were sent to jail. But what about the dogs? During the operation, the police found 120 dogs. They all went to the vet in order to cure all of them. It would take the vet a lot of time to help all these dogs, but that was not an issue for him. The one from James got special attention because he was so crucial in this entire police investigation. A few days had gone by, and James had not heard anything from the police. They told his parents that it was normal procedure and that they would take it over from there. But today the doorbell rang. James opened the door and saw the police standing there. The police wanted to tell James that they had caught the criminals responsible for all this and that they had a small surprise. It was the dog James found in the river, healthy and smiling.